Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Naylor, and I am the director of the Main Enneagram Center for Transformation and Well-Being. And I'm here this morning with my dear friend, Suzanne Dion. And I'm going to change the font. There we go. And Suzanne is a deeply experienced Enneagram teacher, writer, author, just coach, and has a passion for bringing the Enneagram to as many applications with the possibility of really opening up people in different environments and learning to become able to sort of navigate their suffering. And so she's going to talk about all those different places. And she was and is an original founding board member of the Enneagram Prison Project. So she's knows the heart of that work, and we'll get to hear about, just where she's gone to. And so just a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being here. And just tell us about your awesome work you're doing.
Michael, thank you so much for having me. And I'm such an advocate of your work and your passion for this system, reaching others and decreasing so much unnecessary suffering in this world too. So I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
But I got to say, I fell into this work completely by accident. I was going through just a rancorous divorce with a then 3.5, 4-year-old daughter. I had no idea what I had just encountered. I had very little, I will say, reflective awareness at that time. I was my type. I was doing my type, and I was doing more of my type the more complicated my relational difficulties got. And was fortunate enough to be working for an organization development firm that was using the Enneagram to work with all of their management level trainings, but also with CEOs. And they brought in Dr. David Daniels to work with the Fortune 500 leaders with my boss at that time named Frank Lee. And that was the first exposure I had to this thing called the Enneagram. And I didn't know what it was. And I've as a marketing person also, I've always found the name to be kind of funny. It sort of sounds like Candygram or Mammogram. And I thought, this just doesn't have the clout that I sat in the back of the classroom and got exposed to with David Daniels teaching to these CEOs. Mm-hmm. And I went from there to just for my own personal healing, which I really needed at that time. I went and did at that time, it was called the Enneagram Professional Training Program, EPTP, David Daniel and Helen Palmer's training program. And I went and actually completed the program, got certified with no intention other than to heal myself and understand my divorce. And what happened shortly after that was I met Susan Olesic in a Helen Palmer didactic. I also started working with David Daniels on many conferences. I was so enamored with this work and came at it from a marketing background originally. Just how can I support bringing this message to the world? How can I support the organization, support the conferences? And so I started working on the conferences associated with Helen and David, but also met Susan at that time, who had been invited to a prison in Texas through an associate through her church who needed an Enneagram teacher, heard that she had just certified. She and I certified within 6 months of each other. Anyway, she had gone and had that experience, came back. And at that time I was working with her on marketing. And she said, oh my God, it was the most extraordinary. I've witnessed something I can't even tell you, that this has to continue. Anyway, that started conversations between the two of us. It took us a couple of years to actually get into a jail or prison in California after Susan had that experience. It's actually really hard to get into jails and prisons with a program. But we had the vision. She did not want to leave it just in Texas. And I will tell you how much I admire her courage, because I would have never imagined thinking of going into the prison to bring this beautiful work. The fear alone and the terror of just being in that environment, chewed up and spit out. And basically, when we first started and I was there supporting her, I'm like, you go in there, I'm going to stay back here doing all the design. I'll do the logos, I'll do everything. And, and I'm like, And I used to just think this, this little tiny person, she would go in and fearless, and to bring this work to people that so deserve the truth and a chance to know themselves better and a chance to unravel the defense system that's gotten them in so much trouble. And it's big work. It's necessary work, Michael. And the Enneagram is one of the most profound applications I've ever seen working in that environment. And I witnessed some of the other classes going on in the prisons, and some of them just were not reaching the population as much as the Enneagram is able to reach people quickly. And it's a de-shaming, give permission system to look at the defense system within. Now, going back to when I was getting a divorce, I didn't even know I had a defense system. I didn't even know what that meant. I was just being a type 1. I was being a really good type 1. And the worse my relationship got, the more I type 1 to this person to death. So I was, to even start, the system gives us a chance to learn psychology for our own self-healing. We're self-healing creatures, but we need the tools, we need the language, we need to know what to look at inside of ourselves. If you don't know what to look at, we're just going to repeat the cognitive emotional pattern, to borrow that word from Helen. We're going to just repeat these patterns that keep telling us that if you do this, you're going to survive. If you do this, you'll get what you want. If you do this, you're going to be okay, right? And all the conditional ways we love ourselves is bound up in these type structures. So to make a long story short, I got involved, Prison Project, we took off running, and the next thing you know, and we volunteered for several years. And I did start teaching with Susan inside prison per her urging and her guidance and her support. And I was almost mentored into going into that environment and not being scared anymore. Michael, I tell you, I found people starving to be tuned into, starving for truth. It's amazing how there's no care for what has happened to people that end up in that situation. As a matter of fact, I was going through when we landed the contract with San Mateo County, and they took us through a tour of the prison. And I said to the gentleman, I said, so where do you sit them down and find out what happened to them? And he said, man, we don't care what happened to them. And I said, well, if you don't care what happened to them, how are we going to prevent them from doing it again or having it happen to them again once they get out of here? A very naive question, but actually this is the crux of what we all need to be questioning, because they actually come out worse. They come out more angry, more despondent, more lost, more disheveled in so many cases. And that's not what society was hoping for when we lock somebody up and pay some $47,000 a year to keep them there. We're hoping that they'll come out rehabilitated. Well, there's no chance at rehabilitation with coercion and punishment and berating and being told that you're awful and a loser, which is the messages that they're getting right, left, and sideways that even compound what they've already suffered from childhood. So I became incredibly passionate about the criminal justice system and just the movement of humans that are suffering. Where do we put them? How do we deal with them? What do we do with someone who comes out of childhood completely developmentally arrested, full of pain and neglect and abuse? What on earth do we do? When you see a child getting abused in front of you at 2 or 3 or 4, we tend to have some compassion. Well, that same soul, the body grows up into a 22-year-old body. The same damage is there that happened when they were 2 or 3, but now we have no compassion for them. Suddenly they're just supposed to thrive in society, and that's not going to happen. So I became, and I'm still incredibly passionate about this dilemma. It's a societal dilemma. It's a family dilemma. It's a capitalism dilemma. But the way we've allowed for and don't have good means to correct damages, severe damages that are going on in the homes, where children are being injured and neglected and not raised in such a way that they will be able to thrive later, because their whole emotional and defense system is completely out of whack, out of balance. And from levels of dysregulation to not being able to sit still with yourself until you take something to drink or until you get a hit of heroin, or these are all not just individual concerns, they're the concerns of an entire society. And
Absolutely.
I've become really passionate about the unnecessary suffering that is induced from a childhood not meeting enough of the needs of the child, to where we end up with someone incarcerated at 22 or on heroin at 18, and their whole life is in jeopardy.
That's certainly been my experience in working with men in recovery for many years, being a part of a rehab halfway house year-long program. Men would come in who had been deeply wounded by mother, father, the legal system, incarceration added more suffering. And I was often amazed that they could even walk and talk at the same time, the load of suffering they carried. But I also, like yourself, discovered that using the Enneagram, they got a sense of the truth being spoken about how these patterns developed unconsciously as a protection for their heart. It wasn't because they were bad people.
Yeah.
It's because they had a reflex system designed to try to help them live through these trauma, and then became the instrument of continuing more trauma for them because they couldn't, make the shift. But the other thing I discovered was that in the environment of true kindness and compassion and talking about suffering as and defenses as a response to being hurt, that their openness and their hunger to know the truth was amazing. I mean, they would just come right out and just speak the truth of their life. And that was really amazing. In a sense, it's like they just would drop their veil and they would, they would be raw. And I found that they were extraordinarily sensitive and kind people underneath that veil. And so you point to something, it's kind of like when there's an active alcoholic. Usually they're pretty hard to be around, right? But you don't realize that underneath it is this person who's deeply wounded and doesn't know how to get out of it. But when you start to see that unfold and unpack, it's miraculous, and it also, helps me understand that some of the grumpiest people who would come through the Serenity House ended up being the most sweet and kind people as they felt safe. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it is extraordinary that some of the men that I work with had gone through outrageous suffering and were still willing to be open and wanted to learn and wanted to know who they were. Once that sort of curiosity about who are you was in the air, it's like, little kids coming forward saying, give me water. I want to talk about this. So,
yes,
I really feel that. So.
We when in starting this program, of course, there was a lot of concern, I would say. You can't open people up in this environment. You can't teach this kind of psychological work in there. That's not a good place for them to be vulnerable. All thoughtful concerns, no doubt about it. But what had happened, Michael, is exactly what you're saying, that these people, I found those incarcerated, were starving for truth. We're starving to understand, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I repeat what I'm doing? Why can't I get off this drug? Why can't I? Why can't I? Why can't I? And the lack of compassion for what they had been through seems to create a despair. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. They already lived through nobody cares as a child being neglected or abused. And then that gets turned on society. Nobody cares. And also that it also does this kind of projective identification onto the self, right? Well, I don't care about me either. So, and then, the spiral downward is such a massive cascade.
Yeah.
Just caring we had them include a biography, a third-person biography that comes right out of the wisdom of the Enneagram book, right? To write your biography in the third person. So that we started right away.
Oh, awesome.
And just somebody, and we would read them all. Susan and I would read them all, and we'd comment on all of them. I tell you, it was an amazing thing to start to build this kind of a structure and curriculum. But just that somebody was going to read what happened to them and respond and reflect back to them with compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
Well, look at, and then we were tying it to their Enneagram type, of course, right? So we were seeing how the Enneagram type was interpreting certain events in their life, right? And working very succinctly with the work of Dr. Gabor Mate. We brought his work in very early on, Michael, to change the level of compassion for addictive disorders, rather than the very common myths held by addiction. You're lazy, you have no moral compass, you have no willpower, oh, it's just your heritage, you've got a genetic brain that sets you up for addiction, and all this, dispelling those myths. We brought that in very early on. So we started working with compassion. So moving from blaming and hating the self to understanding and having a compassionate view of, oh, that's why I feel that way. That's why, Michael, within a number of weeks, we saw such a difference. They'd come to class with their book and they'd be doing their homework. And we ended up landing a contract with the state of California pretty early on. I think it was 3 years in. But one of the reasons why we were offered to apply for that was that the barracks, the camaraderie and the atmosphere in the barracks was changing.
Beautiful.
And it was, what are these girls doing in there? What's going on with this symbol, this Enneagram thing? And I tell you, the jail that we got our first program in was very hesitant. Also, the symbol kind of spooky looking, what is this? And it was just that the director of that jail was feeling a little bit despondent that her prisoners, she's had a really high recidivism rate, meaning the rate to which people were coming back in. She was at the end of her career and just feeling like she wasn't making a difference with the program she had offered, that she was feeling kind of down. And she's like, I'm going to give this thing a try. It was literally a sliver of hope like that we got into this jail. And once we got into the one jail and we started having measurable results, that's what catapulted us, Prison Project, into what it is now today, is just that one opportunity that we were given. Okay, I'll give you 8 weeks, she said. And it was make or break. And even going in and explaining this, you guys see if you could even get people to sign up for this. So they put Susan in front of this group of people, about 150 guys. And it ended up a class of, I don't know, 15. And that's how it started. But
wow, that's beautiful.
To go from self-attack to self-compassion, just that process, Michael, was so profound. And to watch how fast the Enneagram, being well and comprehensively taught, is able to do that, to give you permission to see yourself without it destabilizing your self-esteem system. And this is David Daniels now quote, that you have to fortify the sense of self first before you can start talking about your defense system, before you can start talking about where your personality's gone wrong. That's too scary if you don't have enough to hold on to within yourself, enough value between you and you. You start hearing what you did wrong. You start hearing that you were mean. I wasn't mean. I didn't do that. It gets so scary, right? To start to see that there's something flawed in us. It triggers all the, I'm not going to be loved, I'm going to be punished, I'm going to be found out. And so until you fortify with enough self-compassion, and also the Enneagram is so amazing at this, you actually have inherent gifts in your temperamental design that belong to you. You really own those talents. So we really organize our curriculum around building the self-esteem first, regulating the self-esteem through the gifts of each of the types. And then only then would we actually start talking about, well, how does your perfectionism as a type 1 actually now become a liability? And then we'd work it around that way to get to the defense system.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But this tool in that environment, Michael, was so powerful.
Hmm.
And while it did create vulnerabilities, they're starving to share.
Yep.
They were so there for each other when there was a disclosure over here on the right side of the room, and the next thing you know, on the left side of the room, this one would go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
like me.
Yeah.
And then
It would
it was
open.
kind of it would, in simulcast, the whole field in
Yeah.
the room started to change,
Yeah.
and we started to see incredible development very
Yeah.
quickly, quickly. I mean, not 4 years of therapy. We're talking about 3-4 weeks of
Yeah.
just starting to build the system, get them associated with the type they believed that they were, helping them identify their type, and then getting into their bios. We just started to see something happen even 4 or 5 weeks in.
Well, the thing I noticed was that there would be a profound relaxation in the men. I don't have to defend anymore. Um, you know, all of us are in this together. We've all have had ways that we had to respond to survive, and those are gifts of my type, right?
Right.
They're not, and sometimes they're overused because I didn't learn the other skills. But there's something about that judgment being dropped, that the whole demeanor of men would soften, and it was like just seeing sort of the little boy come forward, and and then men would start sharing heartbreaking stories, and it would wake everybody up, and that field of compassion and love and tenderness was there. So it was it's that happened fast. That could happen within 2 sessions, that kind of dropping into a more relaxed, less defended way. And then, we often work with the principle of 4 steps forward, 3 steps back. You'll open up, you'll feel safe, and then your defenses will kick back in. Not a problem. We'll just keep, applying grace and kindness and understanding. And I think to the extent that people teaching it had sort of been stripped themselves and had, gone through a lot of inner work, we could both look at each other and go, I'm a fool and you're a fool. We can hang out here. There's no status here. I'm just being a human being, and just a pleasure to be with you right now. So that kind of, I think that egalitarianism, the Enneagram really generates that too, that there's a kind of equality going on that's really, really powerful. And so that, I hear you. I hear you.
That's so beautiful. We would oftentimes bring in people that were Enneagram familiar to come in and do panels and be with the incarcerated. And what I find so fascinating about the Enneagram as a teaching, as a body of wisdom about how we are sort of architecturally, intelligently organized to survive, right?
Yeah,
Including how
yeah.
the defense system takes hold to enable us to keep moving along in our life despite all the injuries and
Mm,
emotional losses from various neglect or needs not being met. But we would bring this type 8 CEO in, and he'd sit on the type 8 panel in prison. So you've got someone who had a childhood that worked a little better than the other in many cases, but I'll be darned, the two of them would have the same exact view of the world. Type
amazing.
8 is type 8 is type 8, whether you're at the top of the echelon of society or whether you find yourself incarcerated,
Mm,
doing whatever you had done,
yeah, yeah.
they still had that same take on who they needed to be to survive and who they could not be
Hmm.
in order to be annihilated. It was exactly the same. And I find that amazing.
It is amazing. It is
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah,
talk about anecdotal data that supports the the foundation of this system,
yeah.
and how powerful it really is to help us see
Mm,
the way personality is organized, and that we are a part of that greater system.
yeah,
We are not random, that
yeah,
nothing about us is just off the cuff random. It's so brilliant,
yeah.
right?
It's amazing. It is
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, say more about where all of this work has gone. Like sounds like you've branched out and you're doing other things that expand the application. I'd love to hear about that if you're would like to share it.
Yeah, no, I'm this work has become my life's purpose. No doubt it's become a calling. It is my calling. And I've been so fortunate, and I've got a design and kind of a multimedia background and company. And so I've been able to actually use those skills to try to bring this work more fervently to others through writing and communication. And actually in 2017, David Daniels had asked me to help him write his last book. He was passionate about the Enneagram and the application of human relationship, particularly romantic relationship, and all the way to human sexuality, and how these different temperamental type structures impacted our intimacy, impacted our communication style, and impacted our defense against bonding, against attachment disturbance, etc. And so we started working on David's last book around 2011. And unfortunately, David passed away in 2017. And I took a couple of years then to actually finish that book on behalf of his vision and his dream. And so that has taken me into a whole nother realm, is really working with, well, what tears us apart actually? What has torn apart these people that found themselves incarcerated? What tears relationships apart? What causes attachment disturbance from the very beginning? And so my work now with the Enneagram is really focused significantly around the human defense system. And what you said is so profound, Michael, because that human defense system, our actual defense mechanism and our system of defense lays right on top of the gifts of our type. But certainly when we get neglected or abused, we're not going to grab some random attribute out of the sky to defend ourselves. We're going to reach for the strength. What kind of temperamental strength do I have to cope with this and to form a way of getting away from this pain on a daily basis? You know, we can't walk around with trauma like this. We wouldn't be able to function, right? So the way that the pain within us gets encapsulated and put to the side, relegated to the shadow, and the way that these protection mechanisms come in to defend against that pain all along the way, I feel is where the rubber hits the road in actually profoundly deep and transformative Enneagram work, to whether it's bettering our romantic relationship, I should say saving our romantic relationships, developing a healthy relationship with the self, and developing a relationship with the self so that we actually don't sabotage our dreams, our visions, our potential, our ability to participate in the world in a way that's loving and fulfilling. So this is where my heart is really working very intimately now, is with the human defense system. I work very closely with Marion Gilbert and establishing the Somatic Enneagram School, which is actually the defense system is activated in the body. We're all fine until we get triggered. Right. And then what happens when we get triggered? Well, we got cortisol, norepinephrine, we've got adrenaline, we've got big chemical responses to getting triggered. And how do I deal with that? I can only deal with that to the level of capacity my body has to hold that pain, right? Cortisol feels horrible, right? Adrenaline starts rushing through my system. My heart starts pounding. I'm either going to defend or I'm going to lock down. And you know, what is that? And how often in a relationship do we look at our partner and go, I told you to never do that again. And I'm like, well, I'd like to not do that again, but talk to my body about that, because I can't control that biochemistry yet. And, you know, working with that, you know, Viktor Frankl and his beautiful statement, you know, between stimulus and response, there is a space. Within that space lies our freedom and our choice. Well, in that space is a bunch of cortisol. So now what do I do with that? So starting to work with tremendous compassion with the wiring of our central nervous system, the wiring of my body, my lymph system, my stress hormones, my lymphatic system, my endocrine system, all these systems are involved in the moment I get triggered. And then here comes my type structure's best cocktail to save me. And we've got a different recipe. We've got it's, the Enneagram, we've got an explosive experience, and express, Dan Siegel calls it, experience that emotion live in the moment, and it's going to get expressed out. Well, tell an 8 just to sit still and be quiet when they have just been offended or somebody has just misused their power in front of them. This is a body experience. So working with the body in this way, Marion Gilbert's brilliance, bringing this to the different Enneagram types, David Daniels' brilliance, and Peter O'Hanrahan, and all the great teachers that have influenced my work, Russ Hudson, to start understanding with compassion what my body does when I'm under perceptual siege. Of course, when a bear lands in my driveway, I'm going to have a nervous system stress response reaction that is fight, flight, or freeze that I don't even have to think about. Those are easy to understand, right? When I'm really in an emergency, my body intelligence is going to take care of me. It's not even a mind thing anymore. But when my ego, the ability for me to regulate my self-esteem is under siege, when I am perceptively threatened, my sense of self is threatened, I'm going to have the same physiological response. And that's what gets us in trouble. And not being able to manage that is not our fault until we can do something different. And that's capacity building. We need more neurons to deal with that. We need more techniques to soothe the uprising of upheaval. We need to learn and practice methods to stay in that pause without short circuiting. And that is no small thing.
It takes many years. It
takes many years, right? And what do we do instead? We grab alcohol, we grab heroin, we run ourselves to death, we go shopping and we start buying stuff because that triggers the dopamine system to help soothe us, right? We binge out, we overeat, we do something because sitting in that pain it's impossible. So this is what I saw working, the prison system and working with couples and working with the relationships, and really what tears us apart on the inside with self, on the outside with others, in the greater reality with society. The people incarcerated, they have torn themselves apart relating to society. And now they've been removed from society, they've been removed from relationships, and they're foundationally completely disconnected from the goodness in the self. And this is tragic. This is the suffering on this planet that is what I'm going to call the unnecessary suffering that, my goodness, it's hard enough to be on this planet in a human life, trying to survive, make a living, meet people and have an experience, all of that with all of the circumstances that can hit us every day that are not in our control. The unnecessary suffering caused by my early wounding, my defense system, the way I defend me against me, the way I keep me from deeply connecting with myself, the fear I have in looking at myself, all of that is so painful. And that's where I think this work can make a significant difference.
Yes, well, I agree. I was speaking with Richard Rohr last week, and as he said many times before, if you don't transform your suffering, you transmit it, and meaning it's got to go someplace. If you don't know how to heal and drop in and heal, and a lot of the primary focus of the men's work is healing core wounds. And he was saying, that I know I'm preaching the choir, but the planet is in trouble. And he said that one of the reasons is that the people who have maybe the most hands-on ability to create change and change how power is used tend to be people who have no consciousness, no inner life, no sense of sensing what is driving them. So their type pattern is what they've identified with, and it's who they are, and they don't understand that there's a conditioned machine that just is running them. So and this is certainly the mission of, I think, most paths, is that if enough human beings become conscious, that they start to create a different atmosphere for the planet. And I was just thinking that, with all the inner work I've been called to, it's like my teacher said to me, he says, just think of this, Michael. You can go on the internet and listen to Eckhart Tolle, Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, Pema Chodron, Russ Hudson, all the great teachers. You have that all at your disposal. So tell me, is it easy to change or is it difficult? You have all the resources. I said, it's really hard. He says, well, if anything, we can learn great compassion because most people don't even know the stuff exists, right? So there's something about, not only does the Enneagram open up compassion for oneself, but it's also noticing, wow, this conditioning I received is faster than lightning. And, my best wish is to be able to ground and be present and not be a reactive piece of the machine. And as my teacher said, well, you will have to apologize quite a bit until that machine slows down. So be of good cheer and don't beat yourself up. But, I think it is central to the transformation of the planet, I think, if we want to have a humane planet that really, well, we feel the sense of our connection with everyone. That if you got to go through the suffering first, or it's just going to be an idea in the head that we can't make happen. So anyway, it's powerful work.
Yeah, Michael, you're speaking so many jewels here that we can't change it by just having an idea that I want to do it different.
Yeah.
Because we've got, of course, we have cerebral intelligence. We also have heart intelligence. The heart has its own central nervous system. It has its own magnetic field. It has its own intelligence. And then we have the gut center of intelligence. We have the body, the whole body's intelligence. And body intelligence is where the transformation actually needs to happen to react differently. Until that, there is no choice.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that Gurdjieff talked about, and this is not just him, but across the board, the idea that, well, we have these three centers of intelligence that rarely talk to each other. It's like the head wants to go here, the heart goes here, and the gut goes here, and under stress, everything collides, and then there's this package of my most well-honed way out of suffering, which is usually my type structure, right? And it's like a tidal wave. Wow. And there you go. And when you first start to get a glimpse of it, it's like, oh my God, I'm just seeing this. This thing's been running for a long time. And I can remember when I first learned about the Enneagram, I was horrified. I went, oh my God, you've just named all my patterns. And then the next thing was learning compassion to observe them, because they still kept running. It didn't matter. I knew them. They still, so, it is what it is. Thank God for loving people around me to help me. And which, so anyway, I'm blabbing away here. What?
No, but to have compassion as we start to watch it running, Michael, that is so big, because without that compassion, there's too much shame.
Yeah.
And shame will truncate the system immediately. And David, who developed the 5 A's as a way to pause, to gain presence, and to be able to consciously choose right action rather than just react. He developed what's called the 5 A's, but that awareness is the first piece. The second one has to be acceptance and appreciation, the third A, without going, God, I'm so glad I'm seeing this. Thank you for letting me see it. And to build in a non-judgmental, non-shaming acceptance is literally critical, or we won't return to the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think even though for us as teachers, and when we were in the working in EPP, we had to watch the shame level so carefully, Michael, because if we triggered too much shame without enough self-fortification, we'd lose them. That was going to be it. They wouldn't go back there.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's, goes along with that idea that if I can learn to observe my patterns without judgment, as a kind of neutral observer, which takes time to learn.
Oh,
Then that reaction of feeling guilty and shameful and self-hating, even if I can observe that with a quiet mind or a quiet presence, it starts to lose its hypnotic power. And I can remember my teacher saying, Michael, every time you discover something about yourself and then you beat yourself to smithereens, all you do is tighten the pattern. So if you're going to beat yourself up, use a feather and try to resist, just observe, feel, what's the direct thing? Well, I don't want to be this way. Okay. But that's different than you're a bad person and you're a failure and you should be, exiled to, the abyss. So I think that was a really big one for me, was learning I don't have to beat myself up when I discover something. I can notice it and be at least non-judgmental. And that seems to be core, certainly for me and others I've worked with. But along the same lines, compassion. I can see that I often think of my patterns as children who get triggered and run out into the street. And I'm like trying to pull them back in, say, come on, back in. It's okay. It's going to be safe here. You don't need to run in front of the car. I trust me, you don't need to shoot the car and its tires. But, just developing some kind of kindness towards this kingdom that I have inherited.
I think it's Almas.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Almas that said, only where there is compassion and emotional safety can the truth be revealed. I think this is Almas.
Yeah.
But when you think about, forget out here, when there's no safety in here, I won't be able to look.
Yeah.
If the moment I see that I just hurt my child, my coworker, and then I start self-attacking, I start shaming and guilting, this isn't safe.
Yeah.
So creating your safe kingdom, me is safe with me. I can see that, and I have a plan for how I'm going to let myself look and how I'm going to hold myself when I look. And we've got to, as teachers and coaches, we've got to build that safety net with our clients, help them to learn how to hold self safely and compassionately.
Absolutely.
First here. And then once we know how to do it here, we'll be able to do it for partner. But I'll tell you, the other thing that I work very closely on is the non-weaponization of the knowledge of each other's defense system, of the knowledge of each other's liabilities in coupleship. And I'll give you an example. This is a live example of a type 7 who's married to a type 9, type 7-8 wing. And the female says, well, can you just say something, like, stop being so, I need you to react. I need you to do something, like, show up for me, So she's interpreting as 9-ness repression as you're not showing up for me. So that interpretation is causing her intense suffering. Because why would someone not show up for you? Well, maybe they don't love you, right? So this is all underneath. And of course, in my colleague was like, well, in type 9, the pattern is to kind of repress. And what happened was she says, we know the Enneagram. I've read all about type 9. He knows all about type 9. It's time to cut it out. So here is where there's still no safety in here, self with self for her, but he is absolutely not safe and cannot change the defense system's natural repression, locking down, 9s, the throat locks up, the hood goes over your head, they can't hear, they dissociate, right? It's a dissociative experience, the freeze response. So until we get safe here, we certainly are not going to be able to engender compassion and emotional safety for the other, especially when we will naturally interpret another's behavior as on purpose.
Yeah.
They have a choice. I don't have a choice, but they do have a choice to stop doing what they're doing. Right? And we can't. We really can't. We can't change the body that fast without practice, like you said, like real practice. Consciousness, heart, and gut, all 3 centers aligning toward this same outcome, the same purpose, the same desire to get compassionately present and witnessing without judgment, without recrimination. And that's the work, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
the work. Once
Yeah.
something's realized, like you said, there's kind of this alchemical something that happens that relaxes
Yeah.
the grip, like the do or die grip that it used to have for some reason. And I tend to think that this is happening biochemically. Somehow the juice lost some of its moxie, it lost some of its mojo.
Yeah.
And it's now maybe being met, maybe loving kindness, right? The biochemistry of loving kindness for the self is causing kind of an alchemical dissolving of the stress hormones that the defense system is fighting so hard to keep in place.
Yeah.
Something happens
There's
where
a
it's
shift.
not as fervent.
Yeah. Well, it's I think when people start to have the experience of noticing these patterns and realizing that the patterns have a mind of their own and it's not their will that's causing the patterns.
That's right.
As my teacher says, when you were a little boy, you didn't say to yourself, when I become an adult, I'm going to have this type 4 pattern of feeling like an outsider and then getting triggered and then feeling like nobody gets. It says, you didn't make that decision. But because God has a sense of humor, you get to relax that system and use it, find access to your deeper soul, yourself, your true nature. And that's hard work, but the end result are, the manifestations of deeper gifts that you really care about. So try to realize that machine, I didn't create it. And he says it's going to run whether you want it to or not, but you develop a different relationship to it. So you're not so tortured or taken or hypnotized. So it's, it's the best work, and sometimes it's the very hardest, but, and all the gifts that I've experienced have come as a result of that kind of inner work. So I'm reminded to stay at it, and may take 4 or 5 more lifetimes to purify this system, but I'm up for that. So
why not? What else have we got to do, right?
What else is there to do? That's what I came here for, right?
That's exactly it. Michael, I love your language. And tortured and taken. That is such a beautiful description of what it feels like to go on defense. And then of course the righteousness that gets involved in just following that familiar path again, all right? Another layer of complexity, but it is being taken and we can't help it. And we had no say in the matter. Our body did it for us when we were too young to decide, I'm a little type 1. I have a girlfriend who was a very expressive little 8. And growing up side by side her, it's like when she got angry, she could talk. I just kept like, wow, I want to be like that. And I couldn't be like that. When I got angry, it was just like a plaster of Paris. I was just locked down and I wouldn't move, that freeze response in the 1 and then the reaction formation. I didn't know what that was. I wanted to be like that, but I was like this, just torturing myself for what's wrong with me. What's happening to me? I want to be something else. I had no reverence for the fact that I was a containing type, that reaction formation is a suppression containing type. There's a gift in that, the same way as her expressiveness was a gift. But we can't, all 9 types can't be expressive. We wouldn't have survived as a species. We need some to hold back, some to move forward, some to, it depends. We need all these different energetic possibilities in us to get along and to cope with one another. But when you were little and it's doing it to us, it can be scary. It can make us feel very alone. We have no way of understanding it psychologically. And that creates a lot of shame or just self-dislike.
And just a sense of what's trustable here. This all happens inside me. I have no one seems to know how to help me with it either, right? So. And
especially if your temperament is different than several of your family members, then it gets really scary.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, Good stuff. Good stuff. Anything else you'd like to add to it? I know you mentioned something about, trying to, that you're doing some work with Dan Siegel, and there's a, book coming out, uh, and that it could be really helpful for perhaps how we help our children when we're working with them, if we understand type. And I just wondered if you'd say a little bit about that work.
Yeah, Michael. So working in the prison system for that many years and really seeing face to face what a harmful childhood really can do. Now none of us comes out unscathed. Let's just make that as a foundation.
Yeah.
The system of being born and individuating, having a temperamental structure, trying to survive, there's going to be unmet needs. There's no way that being raised by humans, every single need can be met. And the way that personality is structured is not going to split into an idealized or a not wanted self. I mean, it's just the way we organize around individuation. So we all have stuff we're working on, but my
Mm.
goodness, I could not have imagined in my own imagination the stories that I had heard in this environment. I had no idea
Yeah.
the level of childhood neglect and abuse and crazy is going on amongst us on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So what I'm working on now, and I've joined forces with Dr. Mary Felice, and we are working on a program. Instead of trying to repair in such severe situations, let's start working on societal prevention,
Yeah.
and let's start addressing parenting practices that have been normalized that actually are very damaging. What's going on in our Western culture that leaves our children bereft, that leaves them in states of neglect, that is actually causing developmental arrest, is actually causing narcissistic defense systems to take hold at such a prevalent level that they are now. So now I'm working on parenting, the Enneagram and parenting, and
Awesome.
we'll be coming out with that next year. But my passion is really let's get the education and the loving kindness and the trauma healing
Mhm.
when we are making children, when we have a
Mhm.
brain in front of us. Let's give it the best possible chance to not
Mhm.
suffer as much and as
Yeah.
unnecessarily as
Yeah.
what I saw happen. By the time you're incarcerated, it's a
Mm.
long road and a traumatic road, and a lot of damage has already been done, including, we were working with the lifers in San Quentin. I mean, these are people that the pain inside is so bad, you're killing others.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
there's so much pain in you for that to happen,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that to be the outlet. And
Yeah.
so let's do something to try to prevent that, and
Yeah.
particularly in marginalized populations, in populations that are struggling with so much external stress, they're at risk.
Yeah.
They're even more at risk. And how do we get more resources in these arenas to help these parents, to support the other in our society that is in over their head, that is actually, we're all part of it. We're not excluded from the mother down the street that is a single mom.
Yeah.
She's in jeopardy. What are we going to do? So
Yeah.
I'm really passionate about that piece of it,
That's
and
awesome. Yeah.
particularly the mother-child attachment bond as the
Mm.
first love affair that each one of us has when we land on this planet. And that
Mm.
primary caretaker, it's usually the mother, but the
Yeah.
one in the mothering role is the
Yeah.
most critical mental health intervention that our
Mm.
society can hope for. And that's Bessel van der Kolk, by the way. The
Mm.
greatest mental health intervention we can hope for is the mother-child bond.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just read that and I know the truth of
Mm.
that. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
really
It is.
working on educating women as to how important we are,
Mm.
those first few years, how we need to be de-stressed, what kind of support we actually need to
Yeah.
develop the cognitive emotional system of our children.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
Very
yeah.
passionate about that. I'm
Awesome.
into prevention now,
Yeah.
right? Let's see
Awesome.
what we can do on the prevention side of this as much as possible using the Enneagram.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate everything you shared, and just the beautiful spirit of loving kindness and the wish to serve and help the planet. I just really deeply appreciate and am moved by, and we certainly have our work cut out for us in this topsy-turvy planetary shifting that's going on. But I do have great faith that none of this work will be lost. So I'm just grateful that there's people like you on the planet that, doing the work you do, and it's certainly a gift to me too. So thank you so much.
Michael, thank you for everything you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're here. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So let me. Where is my recording?